There is something haunting about the way truth hides in language. We often imagine betrayal as a single act, a choice, a night, a message sent in secret. But in reality, it begins long before that, in the tone of a voice, in a sentence said casually over dinner, in a phrase she repeats without even realizing its weight. The subtle language of emotional distance often tells the truth long before the act of unfaithfulness ever happens. When a woman begins to emotionally drift away, her words start to shift in tone, meaning, and energy. It's rarely deliberate. Instead, it's the unconscious way her inner world begins to translate her unmet needs, her quiet disappointments, and her growing disconnection. She doesn't wake up one morning and decide to be unfaithful. Rather, it begins with small linguistic cues that reveal her emotional departure. Conversations that once felt alive now sound rehearsed, cautious, or absent. Where she once used words that expressed connection, we, us, together, she begins to use more individualistic language like me, my, and I. This isn't selfishness, it's a psychological signal of detachment. Her language becomes less about shared experience and more about self-preservation. This emotional distance can appear in moments so subtle that they are easy to overlook. When her partner speaks, she listens, but without the depth of curiosity that once defined their bond. Her replies become shorter, practical, and stripped of warmth. She may still say the right things, but the music behind her words changes. The emotional melody that once resonated in her voice fades, replaced by a tone of fatigue or indifference. It's in these quiet spaces between sentences that the truth begins to echo. What makes emotional distance so deceptive is that it often hides behind politeness. She doesn't necessarily argue or complain, she simply stops engaging. The absence of conflict is mistaken for peace, when in reality it's the silence of withdrawal. Her words no longer reach for closeness, they simply fill the air. When she says, "It's fine, don't worry about it," what she really means is, it doesn't matter anymore. But she doesn't even realize she's saying it that way. The disconnection feels natural because it's become familiar. Language is a mirror of emotion, and when love begins to wane, the mirror starts to distort. Every sigh, every pause, every deflection becomes part of a silent vocabulary of distance. She might still talk about her day, her plans, her stress, but not about her feelings. Emotional intimacy gets replaced by emotional efficiency. And in that shift, something sacred starts to fade, the vulnerability that once tethered her to her partner. The tragedy is that these signs often go unnoticed. The person she's with hears the words, but not the feeling behind them. He assumes her tone is about stress or fatigue, not realizing that her language has already become the soft outline of her departure. By the time he notices the difference, she's already living more in her thoughts than in their connection. The psychology of justification is one of the most intricate and invisible pathways toward unfaithfulness. When a woman begins to drift emotionally or physically from her relationship, she rarely sees herself as betraying. Instead, her mind begins to create narratives that make her choices feel reasonable, even necessary. This process is not born from manipulation, but from emotional conflict. It begins when her needs for attention, validation, or emotional understanding are left unmet for too long. She starts to tell herself stories that bridge the gap between what she feels and what she believes she deserves. These stories become quiet companions to her guilt, allowing her to soothe the inner tension between loyalty and longing. In the beginning, these justifications sound harmless. She might say to herself, "I just need someone to talk to," or "It's not like I'm doing anything wrong." She finds subtle ways to normalize behaviors that cross emotional boundaries: a deeper conversation with a friend, a secret text that feels innocent, a lingering thought that feels comforting. Over time, these small permissions create a cognitive pathway where she begins to feel entitled to what she's missing. It's not that she wants to hurt anyone, it's that she wants to stop hurting herself. The more disconnected she feels from her partner, the easier it becomes for her to rationalize behaviors she once would have questioned. Justification gives her emotional permission to exist in two realities at once. In one, she remains loyal to her partner in form. In the other, she allows her emotional energy to wander elsewhere. It is this dual existence that gives rise to internal confusion. She begins to believe her story more than her truth. She might say, "If he really loved me, he'd notice," Or maybe I deserve someone who actually listens. These thoughts are not meant to destroy the relationship but to protect her sense of worth that she feels is slowly eroding. Her mind uses reasoning as armor against the shame of desire, and slowly, the boundary between right and wrong becomes blurred by the softness of self-defense. The most complex part of justification is that it doesn't feel like lying. It feels like survival. Every emotionally deprived person constructs an inner logic that makes their behavior feel justified. And by the time she recognizes how far she's gone, she's already convinced herself that she had no choice. The act of betrayal then becomes not a rebellion, but a resolution to an emotional imbalance she could no longer bear. The illusion of "I'm fine" is one of the most deceptive forms of emotional defense a woman can express when she begins to lose connection in a relationship. Those two words carry the weight of everything she doesn't want to say. They sound composed, neutral, even reassuring, but beneath them often lives a deep exhaustion. "I'm fine" becomes the mask she wears when vulnerability feels too risky, when honesty feels like it would create more conflict than connection. It's her way of keeping peace on the outside while chaos brews quietly on the inside. The tragedy of those words lies in their dual purpose. They protect her from confrontation while simultaneously preventing her from being understood. When a woman repeatedly says "I'm fine," she's rarely fine at all. She's often overextending herself emotionally, trying to maintain balance in a relationship that no longer feeds her spirit. It becomes her shield against disappointment, a script she repeats to convince herself that things are not as bad as they feel. In her mind, silence becomes easier than explaining a pain she believes will be minimized or misunderstood. Over time, the phrase becomes automatic, a reflex born out of fatigue and self-protection. Her tone may sound calm, but it's the calm of surrender, not peace. This illusion also reveals a hidden dynamic in her relationship. Somewhere along the way, she has learned that expressing discomfort or unhappiness does not lead to healing but to distance, dismissal, or defensiveness. So she stops explaining. She stops expecting. She starts containing. The more she internalizes her emotions, the more fine she appears on the surface, and the more invisible her suffering becomes. Her partner may interpret her calmness as stability, when in truth, it's detachment. It's not that she no longer feels, it's that she no longer feels safe enough to show it. "I'm fine" becomes the quiet language of someone who has stopped asking to be seen. It's the echo of unmet needs and unheard words. Over time, it erodes intimacy because it replaces genuine connection with polite distance. Every time she says it, she builds a wall between who she is and who she pretends to be. She convinces herself that pretending is easier than facing the truth of her unhappiness. Yet beneath the calmness, her heart continues to ache for recognition, for empathy, for someone to notice that fine is not the truth, it's the silence before the goodbye she hasn't yet spoken. The emotional echo is the unspoken truth that lingers beneath every word, every sigh, every silence. It is the resonance of feeling that travels through tone, not vocabulary. When a woman becomes emotionally distant or unfaithful, the signs are rarely found in what she says but in how she says it. Her words may remain kind, her responses measured, her behavior seemingly unchanged, yet the emotional texture behind them begins to shift. The warmth that once lived in her laughter becomes rehearsed, the softness in her voice turns neutral, and her attention feels detached. The emotional echo is her truth trying to speak through the quiet changes that logic cannot disguise. Tone carries emotion in ways language cannot. A simple "I love you" can sound hollow if the heart behind it has dimmed. A good night can feel cold even when spoken softly. These subtleties are not intentional. They are emotional leaks, small traces of her inner world spilling into her outer expression. She may still perform affection, but the energy behind it is mechanical. Her laughter lands flat, her touch feels delayed, her words lose rhythm. It is as if her voice no longer carries the same melody that once reflected connection. Emotional detachment, when left unaddressed, always finds its way into sound. The emotional echo is also what makes betrayal so confusing to those who experience it. The partner senses something is wrong but cannot pinpoint what. There's no confession, no argument, no visible proof, only a change in atmosphere. It's the way her eyes seem to look through rather than into him, or how her conversations feel transactional instead of intimate. The emotional echo speaks a language of absence. It is the feeling of being in the same room yet miles apart. When her emotions have found another space to belong, whether with another person, fantasy, or solitude, her energy shifts, and that shift reverberates in every interaction. What makes this echo powerful is that it never lies. Even when her words are composed, her tone betrays her. Emotional truth has a frequency, and when love fades, that frequency lowers. Her sentences may still sound gentle, but their emotional resonance becomes muted. She might still ask, "How was your day?" but the question no longer carries the same curiosity or care. It becomes habit, not heart. The emotional echo is the silent confession of a woman who has already begun to leave, not in action, but in energy, revealing that the heart always speaks first, even when the mouth stays silent. The deeper cry beneath betrayal is often misunderstood, because what appears as deception on the surface is, in many cases, a reflection of loss, confusion, and longing. When a woman becomes unfaithful, it is rarely just about another person. It's about a part of herself that she can no longer access within her current relationship. Betrayal, in its most human form, is an attempt to feel alive again, to reconnect with a sense of vitality, attention, and emotional presence that has faded over time. Beneath the act lies a silent plea to be seen, to be felt, to be reminded that she still matters. The affair or emotional attachment becomes a mirror through which she rediscovers fragments of herself that she thought were gone. This deeper cry is not for excitement alone but for emotional recognition. Many women who stray do so not because they stop loving their partners but because they stop feeling loved in ways that keep them connected to their own essence. They feel invisible, unheard, or emotionally starved, and in that emptiness, any spark of attention can feel like oxygen. What begins as innocent appreciation or conversation soon becomes something intoxicating, the rediscovery of self-worth. But beneath that thrill lies sadness, because even in her pursuit of connection, she carries guilt and shame. She's torn between the comfort of familiarity and the craving for aliveness. Her betrayal becomes a desperate attempt to reconcile those two worlds. The longing beneath betrayal is deeply human. It's the yearning to be chosen again, not just by someone else, but by herself. The woman who feels disconnected begins to seek proof that she can still inspire desire, that she can still evoke emotion, that she is still capable of being wanted. This hunger is not always about passion, sometimes it's about affirmation, the kind that tells her she's still significant. The act of betrayal then becomes a misguided form of self-restoration, a way to momentarily fill the emotional vacuum she has been living in. But no matter how fulfilling it feels in the moment, the relief is temporary, because the true emptiness lies not in the absence of another person's love, but in the absence of emotional truth within herself. The deeper cry beneath betrayal is therefore not a call for escape but for recognition. It is the sound of an unmet need that has been silenced for too long. It's not the thrill of infidelity that drives her, it's the ache of feeling unseen, the grief of lost intimacy, and the quiet hope that somewhere, somehow, she can still find her way back to herself.